The Georgia sun was already punishing the streets of Edgewood by 9 a.m., but Malik didn't flinch. He walked barefoot, the cracked sidewalk burning under his small feet, gripping a wrinkled photograph as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. He moved with quiet urgency past shuttered stores and rusted fences, through a neighborhood that had long learned how to endure. The photo was of a woman he didn't know, a rich woman from the looks of it. Her smile was soft but tired, her hair wrapped in a silk scarf, seated in what looked like a hospital bed, too clean to be from any clinic around here. Malik had found it in his grandmother's Bible, tucked behind a receipt for castor oil and a folded church bulletin. He didn't ask questions. Miss Thelma said, "Sometimes a calling don't need explaining." And Malik, all of 10 years old, believed her more than he believed most things. He walked towards somewhere he'd never been, Buckhead, where the buildings were tall, the trees trimmed like sculptures, and people didn't look twice at a barefoot boy from the south side. But before we continue this journey of courage, mystery, and healing, don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more stories that touch the soul and challenge what you think is possible. When Malik reached the hospital gates, he stopped to catch his breath. Grady Memorial was where Miss Thelma usually went, but this place, this was something else entirely. It looked like a glass fortress, with a valet station and a fountain taller than the projects he lived in. He wiped sweat from his brow and adjusted the too big t-shirt hanging off his shoulders. The guards at the front entrance wore suits instead of uniforms. One of them looked down at him, frowning. "You lost, lil man?" Malik shook his head. "I need to see somebody." The man chuckled. "Yeah? You and the rest of Atlanta." Malik opened his hand and showed the photo. "She's in there, she's sick, I need to touch her hand." The guard's laughter stopped. He stared at the boy for a beat, then looked over to the other guard. "You hear that?" he said. "Kid thinks he can just walk in and—" "I ain't trying to cause no trouble," Malik interrupted, his voice steady. "But my grandma said once, if someone's spirit is slipping away, sometimes a touch can bring it back." The second guard scratched his chin, uncertain. "You got any family in there, kid?" "No, sir." "Then you got no reason to be here." Malik didn't argue. He backed away slowly, holding the photo close to his chest. He didn't cry. He didn't shout. He just turned and sat down on the bench near the entrance, like he planned to wait there until the building vanished or someone listened. People walked past, nurses on break, delivery guys, visitors in designer sunglasses. Nobody asked why a barefoot black boy was sitting alone with a photograph. Inside, above layers of security and polished marble floors, a woman named Eleanor Kingston lay unconscious in a private suite, machines whispering their concern. Her husband, Charles, stared out the window, tired of doctors who spoke in riddles and experts who offered nothing but more tests. He didn't know about the boy outside. Not yet. But Malik wasn't leaving. Not until he did what he came to do. Edgewood didn't offer much, but what it gave with grit. Blazing sidewalks, chain-link fences wrapped in kudzu, and neighbors who watched each other's kids like kin. In the middle of it all stood a tired shotgun house with peeling green paint and a sagging porch. That's where Malik lived, with Miss Thelma, the only family he had left. She wasn't his mother, though she loved him like one. Miss Thelma was the kind of woman who made cornbread from scratch, talked to God out loud while sweeping the porch, and kept a pistol wrapped in velvet in her Bible drawer. She had raised 4 kids and buried 2. Life hadn't broken her, but it had pressed hard. Malik was quiet, not shy. He spoke when words mattered, when there was something to say. He listened more than most boys his age and carried himself like someone who had seen more than he should. Miss Thelma used to say, "That boy got an old spirit, like he'd been here before." He didn't play much outside. Instead, he stayed close to the porch, drawing shapes in the dirt with a stick, or sitting at Miss Thelma's feet while she told stories of her own mama, of church revivals, and of black healers from down in Macon who could ease pain with a touch and a prayer. Malik soaked up every word. He'd ask questions no child had any business asking, about death, about the soul, about what people feel when nobody else is watching. "Why you want to know all that?" Miss Thelma once asked, rocking slowly in her chair. Malik shrugged. "I just want to help. Like those healers you talk about. She studied him for a moment, her eyes narrowing. You think helping people means you gotta fix 'em? He thought about that. No, ma'am, I just think maybe they don't know they ain't alone. Miss Thelma didn't reply, just reached over and placed her weathered hand on his cheek. They didn't have much. No car, no internet. The roof leaked when it rained. Malik's shoes had holes the size of quarters. Still, he never complained. Not when his mother got sick and had to move into a home out in Decatur. Not when his friends started disappearing. Some to gangs, some to jail, some to silence. Malik held on to the few things that gave him peace. Miss Thelma's voice, the smell of magnolia trees after the rain, and a book he'd found at the library called The Body Keeps the Score. He didn't understand all the science in it, but the idea that pain could hide deep inside a person, that made sense to him. One afternoon, after returning from the library, he found Miss Thelma sitting quiet on the porch, a picture in her lap. She didn't say much that day, just handed it to him and said, "I met her once. She came through here years ago for some charity event. Didn't act better than nobody. Told me I reminded her of her auntie, said if I ever needed anything to find her. Funny thing is, I think maybe you're the one she meant." That night, Malik couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding with something too big to name. By sunrise, he had made up his mind. He wasn't chasing magic. He wasn't trying to be no miracle worker. He just believed deep in his chest that sometimes when the world won't listen, a child's hand might say what no medicine can. So he folded the picture, tucked it into his pocket, and left while Miss Thelma was still snoring. The streets didn't scare him. The heat didn't either. He had a reason. And that was more than most people had. Buckhead didn't whisper wealth. It declared it. The streets were lined with live oaks and townhomes that looked like museums, not places people actually lived in. The hospital sat on a quiet hill, gleaming white and glass like it had been carved from the future. Inside, everything smelled like lemon sanitizer and money. In a private suite on the 12th floor, Eleanor Kingston lay still beneath imported linen sheets. The machines beside her hummed like tired bees, tracking her heartbeat, oxygen, blood pressure. She hadn't spoken in days. Her eyes stayed closed, her body unwilling to move. The nurses called it neurological regression. The specialists called it idiopathic. Charles Kingston just called it hell. Charles stood near the window with his jacket folded over one arm, sleeves rolled, eyes hard. He had built Kingston Holdings from the ground up, hotels, real estate, finance. Once praised as the face of black enterprise in Forbes, he now looked like a man who couldn't buy what mattered most. "How is she?" he asked, not turning when Dr. Livingston entered the room. The neurologist hesitated. No change, still unresponsive. "Her vitals are stable, but she's not improving." Charles exhaled through his nose, jaw clenched. "We've consulted with teams at Emory and even Johns Hopkins," Livingston added. "No one's seen this kind of decline without trauma or stroke. It's like her brain has chosen to shut itself down." "Don't talk to me about theories," Charles snapped. "Talk to me about solutions." Livingston nodded and left quietly. Charles turned back toward Eleanor. Her skin was dull, but her presence was undeniable. Even like this, she carried the elegance of a woman who'd once been the keynote speaker at Spelman, the chair of 3 foundations, and the heart of every boardroom she ever entered. They'd met at a fundraiser in Chicago 23 years ago. She wore a red dress, no jewelry. He'd fallen for her laugh before her looks. They built everything together, empire, legacy, and something like love, though the business always demanded more than either of them expected. Still, she'd believed in giving back. That part was always hers. Eleanor had poured money into community clinics, education grants, and criminal justice reform. Charles admired her for it, even when he didn't understand it. But all of that had come to a screeching halt when she collapsed 3 months ago during a board meeting. At first, it seemed like exhaustion. Then came the tests, the scans, the silence. Now she lay like a memory refusing to fade. The nurses rotated every 6 hours. The nutritionist updated her IV diet weekly. The specialists visited in suits that cost more than a year's rent in most of Atlanta, and none of them could explain why Eleanor Kingston, a woman whose mind had once cut through the noise of boardrooms like a blade, was now unreachable. Charles refused to believe this was it. He couldn't, not after everything they'd survived. Racism, Wall Street, betrayal, loss. This mystery was not going to be the end. He leaned over her, brushing a lock of hair from her forehead. "I know you can hear me," he murmured, "and I need you to fight, because I don't know how to do this without you." No response, not even a flicker beneath the lids, just the beep, just the numbers, just the room. Outside the door, 2 nurses whispered. "She hasn't moved in days," one said. "It's like her spirit's gone somewhere, or waiting for something," the other replied. Neither noticed the security guard walk past, pausing briefly at the window. "Some kid's been sitting outside all morning," he muttered into his radio. "Just sitting there, holding a picture. Won't leave." And though no one inside that room knew it yet, that boy outside, the one no one would let in, might be the one who'd change everything. It was a Sunday afternoon when Miss Thelma sat on the porch with a cold glass of sweet tea and the weight of memory pressing down like the July heat. Malik sat cross-legged at her feet, watching ants crawl through cracks in the wood, waiting for her to speak like he always did when she got that look in her eyes, distant, quiet, heavy with something unspoken. "You ever seen a woman with eyes so sharp they cut right through you?" she asked suddenly. Malik blinked. "You mean like mad?" She shook her head slowly. "No, baby. I mean like clear. Like they saw you and didn't flinch. Like they knew you mattered even when the world didn't." He didn't answer. He just leaned back, listening. "She came here once. Years back. Some fancy outreach thing, all dressed up but not afraid to step off the bus. I remember her heels sinking into the dirt out behind the community center." "Who?" Miss Thelma swirled her tea with one bony finger. "Eleanor Kingston. Didn't go by that name back then. She was still Eleanor Thomas, I think. Her daddy ran a small paper company before they made it big." Malik sat up straighter. "The same Eleanor in the picture?" "Mm-hmm. She came down for a charity drive, bringing books, food boxes, medical supplies. Thought she was just another rich lady wanting a photo op. But she stayed, helped set up tables. Talked to folks like she knew 'em." Miss Thelma smiled at the memory, her voice softening. "She helped me carry a busted box of canned beans inside. Asked my name, asked about you. Said you had a curious spirit just by the way you looked at her. Told me, and I remember this clear as day, if you ever need anything, you find me. I owe y'all more than I can say." Malik frowned. "Did you ever try?" "To what?" "Find her." Miss Thelma chuckled, but there was sadness behind it. "Life don't leave room for chasing ghosts, baby. We barely had bus fare some days. And when your mama got sick, every thought went to keeping her alive." Malik reached for the folded photo tucked beside him. "Why'd you keep this?" Miss Thelma stared at the picture for a long time before answering. "Maybe I believed her, maybe I didn't, but something about her stayed with me, like a note you can't forget the tune of." Silence fell again. The cicadas buzzed louder. Malik's mind churned. "What if she meant it?" he asked. "Meant what?" "That promise. What if it wasn't for you, but for me?" Miss Thelma tilted her head. "That so?" He nodded, voice barely above a whisper. "I think I'm supposed to find her. I think she needs help. You don't know her, Malik. You don't know what she's going through." "I don't have to," he said simply. "I just feel it." The next morning before dawn, Malik stood at the edge of the neighborhood with the photo pressed against his chest. He'd heard rumors Eleanor Kingston was sick. People whispered about it at the church. Miss Thelma's friends mentioned it in hushed voices over pound cake and tea. Some said she hadn't spoken in weeks. Others said she was dying slow. But Malik wasn't afraid of dying. He'd seen enough of it in bits and pieces around Edgewood. What scared him more was silence. The kind that wrapped itself around someone and pulled them away before you even noticed they were gone. He didn't know what touching her hand would do. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. All he knew was that she had looked his grandmother in the eye once and said, "Find me." And so he did. By the time the sun had risen fully, Malik was already planted on the bench outside the hospital's main entrance. His legs dangled just above the ground, dusty and bruised. In one hand he held the folded photograph. In the other, a bottle of water someone had handed him without asking questions. Every few minutes a new person passed by, nurses in bright scrubs, businessmen with Bluetooth headsets, visitors holding balloons. Some glanced at him with confusion, a few with pity. Most didn't look at all. Hours crawled by. The sun climbed higher, relentless. Malik's lips cracked, his stomach growled, but he didn't move. At noon a security guard approached. This one was younger, his walk casual but firm, his badge shining in the light. He stopped in front of Malik and squinted. "You still here?" "Yes, sir." "You waiting on somebody?" Malik held up the picture without a word. The guard leaned in. "That's Mrs. Kingston. You know her?" "No, sir, but I need to see her." The man chuckled and rubbed the back of his neck. "Kid, this ain't Grady. You can't just walk in and ask to see someone like her. There's rules. I'm not here to bother her. I just want to touch her hand." "Why?" the guard asked, his smile fading. Malik swallowed hard. "Because I think it might help." The guard sighed. "Look, I'm sure your heart's in the right place, but this is a private facility, VIP wing. Even staff need clearance. You understand?" Malik nodded slowly but stayed seated. "You can't loiter here all day." "I'll wait." "For how long?" "As long as I got to." The guard looked at him for a beat longer, then walked off, muttering into his radio. 10 minutes later, another man came out. This one dressed in a grey polo with the hospital's logo, a clipboard in his hand. "Are you the boy from Edgewood?" he asked, flipping a page. Malik nodded. "All right, here's the deal. You can't sit here. You're causing a disturbance. If you're not here for a patient or an appointment, you have to leave the premises." "I ain't disturbing nobody." "It's hospital policy." Malik stood. "I'll wait by the fence then." "You wait anywhere on this property without reason, we'll have to call the police. I don't want to do that. Just go on home." Malik didn't say a word. He turned and walked away, slow and stiff, the photo pressed against his chest like armor. He didn't go home. He circled the block, found a spot beneath a tree where he could still see the entrance, and sat again. Inside the hospital, no one spoke his name. Eleanor remained unresponsive. Charles took calls and signed papers. Doctors debated scans and treatments. None of them knew a barefoot boy with nothing but hope was still sitting outside in the dirt. And then, just before sunset, a nurse on break noticed him from the third-floor balcony. She sipped her iced coffee and stared, something in her gut twisting. She'd seen that kind of stillness before, kids waiting at the door for a mother who wouldn't wake up, for a father who'd promised to return and didn't. She finished her drink, tossed the cup and went back inside, but she couldn't shake the image. That night the boy didn't leave. He curled up by the fence under the magnolia tree and used his t-shirt as a blanket. He whispered to the picture before closing his eyes. "Please wait for me." He didn't know if she could hear him, but he wasn't giving up. Not now, not tomorrow, not ever. Keisha had been a nurse for 8 years, long enough to stop flinching at bad news, but not so long that she'd stopped caring. She moved fast, kept her braids in a tight bun, and didn't waste time on pity or promises she couldn't keep. She knew what it meant to be a black woman in a hospital where most decisions were made 3 floors above her head. But something about that boy stayed with her. She'd seen him from the parking deck on her way in for the night shift, small still, sitting with his back against the fence like he belonged to no one and nowhere. She recognized the look in his eyes. Not desperation, not even sadness. It was something quieter, something more stubborn. By midnight, her unit had quieted. Eleanor Kingston's vitals were unchanged. Charles had gone home for the night. The hall lights were dimmed, the nurse's station buzzing softly. Keisha clocked out for her break, grabbed a bag of chips and a ginger ale, and made her way to the back entrance. Sure enough, the boy was still there. She walked toward him, footsteps soft. He didn't look up. "You hungry?" she asked, holding out the chips. He took them without a word, eyes on the ground. Name's Keisha. What's yours? Malik. You been out here since morning? He nodded. Anybody know where you are? He shrugged. My grandma, probably. She knows I had somewhere to be. Keisha sat beside him on the grass, letting the silence stretch. You know the woman in that photo? She asked. No, ma'am. But you think you can help her? I just need to touch her hand, he said. Just once. Keisha studied him. His voice didn't shake. He wasn't acting, he wasn't confused. You think that's gonna fix her? I don't know, Malik said, but I think she'll know she ain't alone. That maybe she'll remember. Keisha felt a lump rise in her throat. She'd grown up just 10 blocks from Edgewood. She knew boys like Malik. Smart, quiet, pushed to the corners of a system too big to care. But this one had something in his voice she couldn't explain. Not hope, exactly. Not faith, either. Just truth. She stood and brushed off her scrubs. You can't sleep out here again. They'll call the cops tomorrow. I'll come back. She looked at him for a long time, then sighed. Come with me. He hesitated. Where? Inside. Just to the staff break room. You can wash your face, get some rest. No promises, though. Malik stood slowly, legs stiff. She led him through the side entrance, past loading docks and metal stairwells. No one questioned her. Most people didn't question black nurses when they looked busy. In the break room, Malik sat on the worn couch while Keisha handed him a blanket and a juice box. Don't touch anything. Don't wander. I'll come check on you in a bit. He nodded, eyes already heavy. Before she stepped out, he whispered, Thank you. She paused, hand on the door. Don't make me regret this, Malik. I won't. Back at her station, Keisha checked Eleanor's monitors. No change. But something tugged at her. She glanced at the photo still pinned to Eleanor's chart, an old one back when her eyes had fire in them. For the first time in weeks, Keisha wondered if maybe this woman wasn't just waiting on medicine. Maybe she was waiting on something else entirely. By the end of that week, Eleanor Kingston's condition had taken a sharp downturn. Her oxygen levels dipped overnight, forcing the medical team to increase respiratory support. Her blood pressure dropped in sudden waves, causing alarms to scream through the private suite like distant sirens of a city on fire. Dr. Livingston stood at the foot of her bed, arms crossed, watching her vitals fluctuate on the monitor. The rest of the team spoke in low voices, throwing around phrases like autonomic instability and progressive neurological decay. None of them had answers. Not one. Charles Kingston stood in the corner, unmoving. His suit jacket was wrinkled, his tie loose, his eyes fixed on the woman he couldn't reach. This wasn't the Eleanor he knew. That woman had filled rooms with energy. This shell, this quiet body tied to machines, was vanishing by the hour. How much time are we talking? He asked finally. The lead resident, a young man with perfect posture and too much confidence, cleared his throat. We don't want to make predictions, sir, but if the decline continues, stop. Charles didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The room went silent. He walked over to the bed and stared at Eleanor. Her eyelids didn't flutter. Her chest rose and fell with the rhythm of something unnatural, mechanical. I want options, all of them. I don't care where they come from. Livingston sighed. We've already consulted with Mayo Cleveland Clinic, Emory. We've tried high-dose steroids, experimental immunoglobulin therapy, deep sedation reversal. Her scans show no physical trauma, no infection, no tumor. It's like her mind shut the door and threw away the key. Charles turned. Then break the damn door. After the doctors left, Keisha entered to change the IV drip. She moved quietly, her face neutral. But inside something was shifting. She remembered Malik's words, how steady he'd sounded. Like he didn't need science to believe what he felt. Charles noticed her hesitation. You've been here a long time, haven't you? Yes, sir, Keisha said, checking the tubing. You believe in miracles? Keisha kept her eyes on the monitor. I believe in people. And sometimes, people do things medicine can't explain. He studied her, then asked, What would you do if you knew something might help, but it sounded crazy? She met his eyes. I'd ask myself if it mattered more to be right or to give her a chance. That night, Eleanor's body trembled for the first time since her decline began. Not a seizure. Just a flutter in her fingers, like something deep inside was trying to rise. It lasted less than a second. But Keisha saw it. She stepped out of the room, heart pounding, and pulled out her phone. She didn't call anyone. She didn't text. She just stared at Malik's name scribbled on the sticky note she kept in her pocket. Down in the break room, Malik lay curled on the couch, blanket tucked under his chin. He hadn't asked to go home, hadn't asked for food or attention. He just waited. Keisha leaned in the doorway for a long moment before stepping inside. "Malik," she said gently. He sat up fast, eyes wide. "She's getting worse. The doctors don't know what to do." He stood, instantly alert. "You really believe touching her might help?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "Why?" "Because I think she's in there, but she's scared. Or stuck. Or maybe just waiting for someone who ain't afraid to believe she's still her." Keisha nodded slowly, the weight of responsibility burning in her chest. "Then maybe it's time someone listened to you." Charles Kingston had never been a man prone to sentiment. His success came from precision, from reading markets and people like open books. He knew when someone was bluffing, knew how to negotiate deals worth millions without blinking. But nothing in his experience prepared him for a barefoot child asking to touch his wife's hand. He met Keisha outside Eleanor's room, arms crossed, eyes sharp. The night had stretched him thin. New scans, more silence, and now this. "You brought him into my hospital?" he asked. Keisha didn't flinch. "I brought him into the break room. He was outside for 2 days. Charles narrowed his eyes. "And now what? You want me to believe this child has what my doctors don't?" "I want you to listen to him. Just once." Keisha stepped aside and Malik stood behind her, small, steady, holding the photo like a truth no one else could see. Charles looked him over, his gaze unreadable. "What exactly do you think you're going to do?" Malik didn't waver. "I don't know, I just want to hold her hand, that's all." Charles exhaled, more in frustration than anger. "And why should I let a stranger, some kid, touch my wife when every expert I've hired can't even explain what's wrong?" Malik's voice was quiet but firm. "Because I'm not afraid to believe she's still here." The words hung in the sterile air like a dare. Charles stepped closer, towering over Malik. "This is not a game. That woman in there is everything to me. If I let you in that room and this is some kind of—" "It's not," Malik interrupted. "I don't want anything from you. I just think maybe she needs someone to remind her she ain't gone yet." Keisha watched the exchange silently, her pulse quickening. She saw something flicker in Charles's expression. Pain, pride, fear all tangled together. "You got 1 minute," he said at last. "And I'll be standing right there. One wrong move, one word too much, and we're done." Malik nodded once. Charles turned to Keisha. "Clean him up. He touches nothing but her hand. No cameras, no press." When he walked away, Keisha let out a slow breath. Malik didn't move. "You ready?" she asked. He nodded again, but his hands trembled as he handed her the photo. "Are you sure about this, baby?" He looked up, eyes dark and calm. "I'm sure." She led him to the washroom. He rinsed his face, scrubbed his hands, wiped dirt from his arms with damp paper towels. She handed him a clean hospital gown to slip over his ragged shirt. Before walking him down the hallway, she knelt beside him. "He's scared," she said. "Not of you, but of losing her." "I know," Malik replied. "Me too." Keisha blinked, caught off guard by the weight in his voice. As they approached Eleanor's room, the air seemed to shift, quieter, heavier, like time had slowed just enough to let something impossible in. Charles stood by the door, arms folded. "You do this once," he said. "Then you leave. Understood?" "Yes, sir." He opened the door. Malik stepped in, and behind him Keisha whispered a prayer, not for miracles, but for something real to break through. The room was too quiet, the kind of silence that made even the softest sound feel loud. Malik stepped in, slow and small, his eyes sweeping across the machines and tubes and blinking monitors. Eleanor lay in the center, a thin blanket over her frame, her face pale and still like porcelain, warmed just enough to stay human. Charles stood by the far window, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Keisha hovered by the doorway, heart in her throat. Malik didn't speak. He didn't ask questions or look for permission. He walked to the side of the bed, the hem of his gown brushing against the floor. His hands, still damp from washing, trembled as he reached out. He hesitated. Then he placed his fingers gently on Eleanor's hand. Her skin was warm, not hot, not cold, just warm enough to feel like someone was still in there. Her hand didn't move. Her eyelids didn't flutter. Malik closed his eyes. He didn't pray. He didn't whisper magic words. He just stood there, still and present, letting his small hand rest against hers like it belonged there. After a moment, he began to speak. Softly, like he was talking to someone who'd been asleep too long. "My mama used to hum when I was sick," he said, "even when she ain't have the medicine." Said humming made her feel like the pain didn't own her. No one interrupted. She'd sit by the bed and touch my hand just like this. She didn't say, "You'll be okay." She just stayed. He paused, eyes still closed. "You don't gotta talk. Don't gotta wake up. Just know I'm here. I know you feel far away right now, but you're not gone. Not all the way." Charles shifted, lips parting, but said nothing. Malik lowered his head a little. "Miss Thelma said you once made a promise that you'd come back if somebody needed you. Maybe I'm here for that. Maybe you forgot. But I didn't." Silence again, until it wasn't. A twitch, so small it could have been imagined. A ripple beneath Eleanor's eyelid, then barely a flicker in her fingers. Malik opened his eyes. He felt it. Her hand moved. Just the slightest squeeze, a whisper of pressure, like a breath returning to lungs that had given up. Keisha stepped forward, hand flying to her mouth. Charles stood frozen. Then it happened again, a subtle shift in Eleanor's jaw, a tremor at the corner of her lip. Malik looked straight into her face. "You still in there, ain't you?" A tear slipped from the corner of Eleanor's eye. Not reflex. Real. Alive. Charles let out a noise, part gasp, part broken sob as he moved closer. "Eleanor?" No response. But the monitors told a new story. Her heart rate picked up, slightly, steadily. Her oxygen levels adjusted. Brain activity spiked on the EEG. Keisha stepped to the machine, blinking hard. "Something's happening." I don't know how, but..." Charles dropped to his knees beside the bed, one hand gripping the railing. "Baby, if you can hear me, I'm here. I'm right here." Malik stepped back, letting go of her hand, his own heart thudding loud in his chest. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just whispered, "That's all I came to do." Then he turned and walked out, the room behind him no longer quiet in the way it had been. And somewhere deep inside, a woman thought unreachable. Something had shifted. By morning, the hospital buzzed like it hadn't in weeks. It started with the nurses. Whispers passed from floor to floor, about a woman who cried for the first time in months, about a heartbeat that had steadied after weeks of drift. Keisha stood at the nurses' station, fielding questions she couldn't explain. "You saw it with your own eyes?" one asked. "She squeezed his hand?" Keisha nodded, still stunned, and cried. Just one tear. Across the hospital, monitors had captured the changes, subtle but undeniable. EEG readings showed unexpected neural activity. Vital signs shifted into new rhythms. Something had changed and the data backed it up. Dr. Livingston stared at the charts with his mouth slightly open. "These numbers. This isn't just placebo. She was flatlined emotionally for weeks. Now we're seeing spontaneous responses, frontal cortex reactivation." The other doctors huddled around the screen. Nobody said, "Miracle." Not yet. But they all knew something had happened beyond protocol, beyond precedent. Livingston flipped through Eleanor's file. "Who gave this boy access?" Keisha straightened. "I did." Charles Kingston stood behind her, arms crossed. "And I approved it." The room froze. One of the attending physicians cleared his throat. "Sir, with respect, this—" "I know how it looks," Charles cut in. "I also know my wife. I've seen her fight for her life more times than you can count. And I saw something in her eyes last night I haven't seen in months. I don't need your permission to know when something matters." The room fell silent. Then someone asked, "Who is the boy?" "No idea," Charles replied. "He just showed up with a photo and asked to help." By noon, the story had started to leak. A receptionist had told a friend, who posted online, and from there it caught fire. "Boy heals millionaire's wife with a touch," one headline read. "Doctors baffled by mysterious awakening," read another. Malik's name hadn't been released, but pictures circulated. Grainy shots from a distance. A small boy walking into the hospital in a hospital gown and dusty socks. Speculation exploded across social media. Who is he? Where did he come from? Is it real or staged? Keisha scrolled through her phone during her break, watching the comment threads explode. Some called it a blessing. Others called it manipulation. One post accused the hospital of exploiting a child for publicity. She set her phone down, tired. In the corner of the room, Malik sat quietly, knees tucked to his chest. "They mad?" he asked. "Some," Keisha said. "Some think it's a setup. Some think you saved her." "I didn't save her," Malik murmured. "She ain't broken. She just forgot something." "Forgot what?" He looked up at her, eyes deep and still. "What it feels like to matter." That afternoon, Charles requested another scan. This time, Eleanor responded to sound. Not speech, but rhythm. A soft hum from the machine beside her triggered small eye movement. The neurologist confirmed it. "It's like someone found the switch," Livingston muttered. Charles stayed by her side, holding her hand now, murmuring things he never said before. His hard exterior cracked, not with grief, but with a strange kind of hope. "Keep talking to her," Keisha advised. "That's what Malik did." "Where is he now?" "Sleeping," she replied. "He's just a kid." But somehow he knew exactly what she needed. And for the first time in weeks, the hospital wasn't waiting for her to die. It was waiting for her to wake. Malik wasn't sure why they kept letting him back into Eleanor's room. Maybe it was because Charles had run out of options. Maybe it was because Keisha refused to take no for an answer. Or maybe it was because Eleanor herself, though silent, seemed to respond differently whenever the boy was near. Each day Malik sat by her bed. He didn't fuss with the machines or ask questions about her condition. He just talked. About Miss Thelma's cornbread. About the way the magnolia blossoms smelled after rain. About the stars that peeked through the haze above Edgewood on the nights when the power went out. Sometimes he sang. His voice was small, thin, but steady. He hummed the same lullabies his mama used to sing when her body ached too much to speak words. The melodies filled the room like gentle threads weaving into the silence. The first time Eleanor twitched her lips into something resembling a smile, Keisha nearly dropped the chart she was holding. "You saw that, right?" she whispered. Charles nodded slowly, eyes locked on his wife. She heard him. Encouraged, Malik kept returning. He didn't bring gifts, only his presence. He'd take Eleanor's hand, thumb brushing against her skin in slow circles, and tell her stories. "You know," he said one afternoon, "when my mama first got sick, I thought if I was quiet enough, the sickness would forget she was there. Didn't work, but I kept trying. Maybe that's what you're doing. Maybe you hiding so it don't hurt. But hiding too long just makes folks lonely." Eleanor's fingers shifted again, curling weakly around his. For the first time, her eyelids fluttered. Charles leaned forward, voice breaking. "Eleanor? Baby, it's me?" A hoarse sound escaped her throat, just a scrape of breath, but more than silence. She tried to form a word. Her lips shaped something close to boy. Keisha's heart skipped. "She's asking for him," she said. "For Malik." Charles looked at Malik, then back at his wife. "Is that it? You want the boy?" Another faint breath. This time the syllables were clearer, though fragile. "Boy, with the stars." Malik tilted his head, confused. "Stars?" Keisha smiled softly. "Your eyes. She's talking about your eyes." That night, Malik sat longer than usual. He sang to her until she drifted into a deeper rest, her body calmer, her breathing steadier. Charles stayed nearby, quieter than anyone had ever seen him, listening to the child who'd somehow reached his wife when no one else could. Later, as Malik slipped out of the room, Charles stopped him in the hallway. "Why do you do it?" he asked. Malik shrugged. "Because nobody should be alone when they're scared." Charles studied him, trying to reconcile the ragged boy from Edgewood with the force that had sparked life in Eleanor again. For once he had no reply. The hospital began to shift around them. Nurses lingered longer near Eleanor's room. Doctors came with clipboards documenting every flicker, every sound. And yet, beyond the data, what mattered most was what everyone could see with their own eyes. Eleanor was coming back, and at the center of it was Malik. Each day, her voice grew less like a ghost and more like a whisper trying to find its way home. And each day Malik answered, not with medicine or science, but with the simple truth of being present. By the end of the week, Eleanor had spoken her first full sentence. She opened her eyes, looked at her husband, then at the boy holding her hand, and said, "I remember." Eleanor's first sentence spread through the hospital like wildfire. Nurses who had nearly given up now spoke in hushed tones about hope. Doctors redoubled their efforts, charting every sign of progress. And outside, the world was watching. By the time the story hit the evening news, Malik's face was everywhere. A cell phone photo, taken by a visitor in the hallway, captured him sitting at Eleanor's bedside, her frail hand wrapped around his small one. The headline blared, "Mystery Boy Sparks Recovery in Millionaire's Wife." At first, the response was awe. Commentators debated on television. Preachers called it divine, and neighbors in Edgewood claimed him as their own. But the tide turned quickly. "What business does a child have in a hospital room?" one anchor demanded. "Where are his parents?" Online, accusations multiplied. Some claimed Charles was exploiting Malik for publicity. Others accused the hospital of fabricating the story to hide malpractice, and the harshest voices said Malik was being used as a pawn. Miss Thelma nearly dropped her phone when a social worker knocked on her door 2 days later. "We've received reports of neglect," the woman explained. "There are concerns about Malik's safety." "Neglect?" Miss Thelma's voice cracked. "That boy's the reason I get up every morning. He's the only family I got left." The worker's tone was polite but firm. "With all this media attention, we need to evaluate what's best for him." Malik overheard the conversation from the kitchen. His stomach tightened, but he said nothing. That night, as he lay on the couch, Miss Thelma stroked his hair and whispered, "Ain't nobody taking you from me. You hear? Nobody." Meanwhile, in Buckhead, Charles faced a storm of reporters camped outside the hospital. "Mr. Kingston, is it true you're letting an untrained child participate in your wife's care? Do you believe this is a miracle or a manipulation?" Charles didn't flinch. "What I believe is my wife is improving, and that boy has been more effective than any of you who stand here asking questions." But the pressure grew. The hospital board called an emergency meeting. Lawyers whispered about liability, and doctors worried about reputations. Inside the hospital, Malik felt the shift. Nurses still smiled at him, but now their eyes held caution. Keisha noticed too. One evening she found him sitting in the corner of the break room, hugging his knees. "They think I did something wrong," he murmured. "No, baby, they're scared. When folks can't explain something, they try to control it. What if they send me away? What if I can't see her no more?" Keisha crouched in front of him, her voice steady. "Listen to me. You didn't do anything wrong." You reminded her she wasn't alone. That's not against the law, no matter what they say. Malik nodded, but the fear lingered. That same night, Eleanor whispered again, this time to Charles, her voice barely audible. "Don't let them take him." Charles stiffened. "Who?" "The boy. He brings me back." It was the clearest she had spoken yet. Charles squeezed her hand, something heavy stirring in his chest. The next morning, when the hospital board demanded that Malik be barred from the VIP wing, Charles made his choice. "You close that door to him," he said, "and you close it to me, and this hospital will never see another dollar from the Kingston family." The room went silent. And though Malik didn't know it yet, powerful forces were lining up on both sides, some to push him out and some to keep him exactly where he was. The morning light spilled across Eleanor's face as she stirred, her lips trembling like they were trying to remember how to form words. For weeks her body had been still, her silence heavy as stone. But now, with Malik by her side, something was breaking through. "Water," she whispered, the sound raw, fragile, but unmistakably hers. Charles jerked upright from his chair, eyes wide. "Say it again." "Water," she repeated, voice cracked but clear enough to shatter the room's stillness. Keisha hurried forward, holding a cup with a straw to Eleanor's lips. Eleanor sipped slowly, each swallow a small victory. Then she turned her gaze toward Malik, the boy seated quietly at her bedside, fingers laced through hers. "You," she rasped, "you stayed." Malik nodded, his small voice steady. "Told you I wouldn't leave." Charles pressed a hand to his forehead, overcome. His wife's voice, the one he thought he might never hear again, filled the sterile air like music. He couldn't stop the tears that slid down his face. "You don't understand," Eleanor said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "He didn't heal me. He reminded me I was alive. He reminded me I wanted to live." Her words rippled through the room. Keisha blinked back tears, her clipboard forgotten. Even Dr. Livingston, who had slipped in during the commotion, lowered his head in silence. By evening, Eleanor insisted on speaking directly to the media. Charles resisted at first, but she wouldn't be silenced. "People need to know the truth," she told him. "Not the rumors, not the noise, the truth." With cameras rolling, Eleanor sat propped up in her hospital bed, her voice frail but fierce. "I want to be clear," she began. "Doctors saved my body. Machines kept me breathing, but it was a boy, Malik, who saved my spirit. He didn't ask for fame. He didn't ask for money. He just held my hand and refused to let me disappear." Reporters leaned forward, scribbling notes, cameras flashing. "What do you say to those who claim this is manipulation?" one asked. Eleanor's eyes sharpened. "They don't know what it's like to be trapped in silence. They don't know how it feels when the world writes you off as gone. That boy gave me back my voice, and I will defend him with mine." Charles placed a protective hand on her shoulder, his gaze locked on the cameras. For once, the businessman who measured every word let his wife's truth speak louder than strategy. Back in Edgewood, Miss Thelma watched the broadcast on her flickering television, tears wetting her cheeks. "That's my baby," she whispered. "That's my Malik." Public opinion shifted overnight. Where there had been doubt, now there was awe. Where critics had raised suspicion, now Eleanor's words silenced them. Social workers who had questioned Malik's place suddenly found themselves under scrutiny. And those who had accused the hospital of exploitation faced Eleanor's defiance. But for Malik, none of that mattered. He didn't care about cameras or headlines. All he cared about was the sound of Eleanor's voice, shaky but sure, calling him back to her side. That evening, as the reporters cleared and the room grew quiet again, Eleanor held Malik's hand tighter. "You gave me back my fight," she said. "Don't ever doubt that." Malik looked at her, the weight of her gratitude heavy but not unwelcome. "I didn't do nothing special," he replied. "I just believed you were still here." And for the first time in a long while, Eleanor laughed, a soft, raspy laugh but real, and in that laugh was the sound of a woman coming home to herself. 2 weeks after her first words, Eleanor Kingston stepped outside for the first time in months. The hospital staff gathered quietly in the courtyard as she walked with Charles at her side, one arm steadying her, Malik just a step behind. Cameras weren't allowed, but whispers still traveled fast. The millionaire's wife was not only alive, she was standing. Her recovery wasn't complete. Her body trembled with effort. Her voice still came in short bursts, but her spirit was burning bright again. And with each passing day, she asked one question more often than any other. "When can I see Edgewood?" Charles frowned every time. "Why would you want to go back there?" "Because that's where this started," Eleanor replied. "That's where I made a promise I nearly forgot." Miss Thelma nearly fainted when a black SUV pulled up outside her house a week later. Out stepped Eleanor, leaning on a cane, dressed simply but radiating dignity. Behind her, Charles adjusted his tie, and Malik jumped out after them, smiling wide. Miss Thelma clutched her apron. "Lord have mercy," she muttered, before breaking into a grin. "You really came." Eleanor hugged her with surprising strength. "I told you I'd return one day. Took me a little longer than I planned." They sat on the porch, sipping sweet tea. Eleanor listened as Miss Thelma described the struggles of the neighborhood, kids without doctors, families without resources. Eleanor's expression hardened with resolve. "We'll fix that," she said. "Not with charity. With respect, with investment." Charles raised a brow. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," she replied. "Edgewood saved me twice. Once years ago when I was just a woman trying to understand my place, and again through Malik. It's time I give something back that lasts." Within a month, the Kingstons funded a new community clinic in Edgewood, staffed, supplied, and sustainable. Eleanor insisted it carry no family name. "This isn't about us," she said at the ribbon cutting. "It's about home." For Malik, the changes were more personal. Charles called him into the study one afternoon, papers spread across a polished mahogany desk. "You ever think about school?" Charles asked. "Yes, sir, but we can't afford nothing fancy." Charles slid an envelope toward him. Inside was a letter with an embossed crest, an acceptance to a prestigious private academy, full scholarship. Malik's eyes widened. "This for real?" "As real as it gets," Charles said. "You've got potential. I won't let the world waste it." Malik swallowed hard. "I can't leave Miss Thelma." "No one's asking you to," Charles replied. "This is about building a future. One day you'll have choices she never had." When Malik showed Miss Thelma, she pressed the letter to her chest, tears streaking down her cheeks. "Baby, your mama would be so proud. Don't you dare waste this chance." Meanwhile, Keisha received news of her own. Called into the administrator's office, she braced for reprimand. Instead, she was handed a promotion, head nurse of the unit. "You took a risk most wouldn't," the director said. "And you were right." Keisha walked out smiling, thinking of the boy she had smuggled into the break room that first night. Life in Edgewood wasn't fixed overnight. Poverty didn't vanish, and struggle still lined the streets. But something had shifted. Kids spoke Malik's name like he was a legend. Parents nodded with pride when Eleanor's clinic opened its doors, and through it all Malik stayed the same boy, quiet, thoughtful, steady. But now he carried something new inside him, not just hope, direction. Years passed. Seasons turned over Edgewood, painting the neighborhood with the same struggles and the same stubborn beauty. Malik grew taller, his shoulders broader, his eyes still carrying that quiet weight. The boy who once sat barefoot outside a hospital fence now walked in polished shoes across the campus of Morehouse College, a scholarship student with a future he could almost touch. He studied medicine, pediatrics to be exact. He wanted to help children who didn't have a voice loud enough to reach the world's ears. "Kids don't get to choose their battles," he told Miss Thelma one evening as they sat on the porch. "But maybe I can help 'em fight." Miss Thelma, hair silver now, patted his hand. "That's what you was made for, baby. That's your calling." Letters came often from Eleanor and Charles. Eleanor's handwriting was shaky but full of warmth. She wrote about the clinic, about the kids who came through its doors, about how Malik's name was spoken in every corner of Edgewood with reverence. "Don't ever forget," she wrote once, "you didn't just save me. You reminded me of who I was." Charles kept his words fewer but firm. "You've got family here." Always. Keisha, too, remained a constant presence, still at the hospital, now training new nurses, reminding them that compassion was as powerful as any machine. Every Christmas, she sent Malik a card with a single line: "Never stop believing in what can't be explained." Years later, on a grey morning heavy with rain, Malik sat at the bedside of a small boy no older than he had been that first day in Buckhead. The child was weak, his breathing shallow, fear clouding his eyes. Malik didn't reach for charts first. He didn't speak in complicated medical terms. Instead, he pulled up a chair, took the boy's tiny hand and held it. "You're not alone," he whispered. "I'm right here." The boy's breathing slowed. His grip tightened. Malik stayed, not as a doctor yet, but as someone who knew the weight of silence and the power of presence. In that moment, he felt the circle close. The boy who once believed his touch could reach where medicine could not had become the man who proved it true, not by miracle, but by love. That night, walking home through the rain, Malik tilted his face to the sky. He thought of his mother, of Miss Thelma, of Eleanor, of Keisha, of Charles, of every soul who had shaped him. The city lights blurred in the downpour, but he didn't mind. Because he understood now, life was not about grand gestures or impossible cures. It was about showing up, about choosing to stay when the world wanted to look away, and that choice, he knew, could change everything. So, if you've walked with Malik through this journey, let his story remind you. Hope is not a distant miracle. It is the hand you hold, the word you speak, the presence you give. And before you go, make sure to subscribe for more stories that move your spirit. Don't forget to click the next video on screen, because every ending carries the seed of another beginning. The boy who once asked to touch a millionaire's sick wife had become a man who touched lives everywhere. And what happened that day in Buckhead? It never stopped echoing.